This coming Sunday will be Proper 8, or the third Sunday after Pentecost. The gospel passage that Gaffney chose for this week is Mark 7:10-13. It's very short, only 4 verses for us to ponder today. And to be honest, I found it difficult to prepare for today's contemplation. I'm not sure if my struggles stem from lingering brain fog from Lyme disease, or if it's because this passage is only a couple of verses that are plucked out of a larger narrative. That always strikes me as difficult. I don't know, but let me give you a bit of background to see if that makes it a bit easier for us to enter this scene. In Mark chapter 6, Jesus is in full rock star mode. He miraculously feeds 5,000 plus people with meager rations. He walks on water and calms the raging wind. And then he travels around healing many sick people. Mark 6, verse 56 says, "And wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed." So you see what I mean about rock star mode? I mean, everybody is flocking to Jesus, wanting to touch his garment. But in chapter 7, the mood changes. The Pharisees and scribes, who haven't been part of the story since way back in chapter 3, arrive on the scene. They, of course, are not fond of Jesus, and they aim to destroy him. See Mark 3:6. It's actually kind of humorous what they choose to complain about here at the beginning of chapter 7. They notice that some of the disciples were eating without first washing their hands. Really? That's what they choose to be judgmental over? I guess in their defense, Mark explains that the Pharisees and all the Jews observe elaborate cleansing rituals, especially when coming from the market. It turns out, though, that this is not a Torah-commanded practice for everyone to follow. The Torah does address the need for priests and their household to participate in cleansing rituals before eating consecrated food. So apparently the ever-pious Pharisees had adopted the practice for themselves, and over time began requiring it of all Jews to follow as well. Timothy Geddard, in the Believer's Church Bible Commentary, has this to say: "They, the Pharisees, have tried to impose their traditions on their fellow Jews, questioning the piety of those who ignore these traditions. By referring to the tradition of the elders, Mark introduces the real issue at stake. The Pharisees have substituted their own traditions for the will of God. The Pharisees are naturally of a different opinion than Jesus. To them, the traditions of the elders are designed to support and safeguard the written law. The traditions interpret the law, clarify debatable points, and provide specific applications to everyday situations. The traditions are for them a guardrail around the law, ensuring that no one will inadvertently step over the line. According to the Pharisees, these supplements to the written law are more than mere traditions. They are faithfully transmitted obligations. Some Pharisees even claim that they were part of God's revealed law given orally at Mount Sinai, along with the written law. And they faithfully passed down through the century, and then faithfully passed down through the centuries. It is the mission of the scribes and Pharisees to interpret and enforce them. In reality, the additional weight of these added traditions make the law an almost unbearable burden. People who try to live by them almost inevitably are caught up in doing things or avoiding things, forgetting what really matters, the heart. So Jesus responds to the Pharisees' question by quoting Isaiah and calling the Pharisees hypocrites. Then he says, "You have a fine way of rejecting the commands of God in order to keep your tradition." The next verse is where our passage begins today. Before I read it, though, I want to explain one of the words that is used in this passage. The word is korban. It's actually a Hebrew word that means offering or something brought near the altar. I'm not sure why Mark didn't choose to translate it into one of the several Greek words that mean offering or sacrifice. This is the only time that the word korban isn't translated into Greek in the New Testament. But it occurs 82 times in the Old Testament. So it's a really important word in the Jewish tradition. So to kind of get a sense of what korban is and what it means to them, I want to read to you again from Geddert's commentary. Let's see here. In support of Jesus's charge that his accusers are rejecting God's law, Jesus cites one example, but claims that many others could be cited. The example chosen is perhaps hypothetical and likely extreme, but it makes the point well. It involves the swearing of a korban oath, dedicating a property gift to God or the temple, and thus making it unavailable for secular/profane use by anyone but the donor. Jesus is not criticizing the giving of an offering to God. It is the abuse of the korban oath that is unacceptable. Declaring something korban does not necessarily mean actually giving it to God. One verbally sets it aside like a trust fund, yet may retain use of it. It simply becomes unavailable to other people as if it has been given to God. A son may go so far as to inform his parents with a vow that anything they might have expected to receive from him, support in their old age, is now korban to them, not available for their benefit. The son could keep it for himself. The son could keep for himself what he actually owed his parents, who could not touch it. And the religious establishment stands on the side of the son who made this oath. Jesus considers this a breach of the commandment to honor parents and therefore a principle deserving of death. The Pharisees, according to Mark 7, would defend such a korban oath, thus setting their tradition above God's law. So, like I said earlier, this is a really short passage, and I struggled to come up with many questions to guide our contemplation, but hopefully God will use this time to inspire us anyway. So that is all the talking commentary I'm going to do. I'm going to light my candle as a symbol of God's presence with us here today and pray for our graces to know Jesus more intimately, to love him more intensely, and to follow him more closely. Mark 7:10-13. Jesus said to the scribes and Pharisees, "Now Moses said, 'Honor your mother and your father,' and whoever speaks evil of mother or father must surely die. But you all say that if anyone tells father or mother, a korban, gift offering to God, is whatever support you might have had from me, then you all release them from any obligation for mother or father. Thus you make void the word of God through your tradition that you all have handed on. And you all do many things like this. This is the word of the Lord. Told you it was short. Before I guide you through the passage with questions and pauses, let us take a couple of centering breaths, breathing in God's Spirit and breathing out anything that distracts you from being in the presence of God. I pray again for today's graces, to know Jesus more intimately, to love him more intensely, and to follow him more closely. I invite you to enter the story. After coming from the marketplace where many people begged Jesus to heal them, you sat down to a meal with Jesus and the others that follow him. Imagine eating with Jesus and the others. What is your mood as you think about all that you have recently witnessed? What do you talk about as you eat? What does it feel like to be interrupted by some Pharisees and scribes who judge and criticize you? How are you feeling when Jesus calls them hypocrites and accuses them of rejecting the commandment of God in order to keep their traditions? Jesus said to the Pharisees and scribes, "Now Moses said, 'Honor your mother and your father, and whoever speaks evil of mother or father must surely die.'" As Jesus reminds them of this commandment from God, what are you thinking? Have you honored your parents? Or have you found a way to get around this commandment? Jesus continues, "But you all say that if anyone tells father or mother, a korban, gift offering to God, is whatever support you might have had from me, then you all release them from any obligation for mother or father." How do you react to the Pharisees' support of a legal loophole to get people out of the financial obligation the Torah requires of adult children to care for their parents? Do you find this loophole tempting? Thus you all make void the word of God through your tradition that you have handed on? How do the Pharisees react to Jesus calling them out? And you all do many things like this. How have the Pharisees twisted other parts of the Torah to serve their desires? To serve the narrative they're following? Can you think of ways that you may have done this as well? I invite you to spend the next 10 minutes in a colloquy with the divine. Speak to God about what you experienced during the contemplation. It's very short contemplation, especially the parts of the story that cause you to experience strong emotions. What might God want to say to you about your life as it relates to this story? When I sound my chimes, this will indicate that you have about a minute to wrap up your colloquy, after which time I will end the silence with this week's psalm. If you're doing this contemplation later with the recording, go ahead and hit pause now and spend as much time in conversation with God as you feel you need. Then restart the video when you are ready to hear the reading of the psalm. I will close our time of silence with Psalm 144, verses 3-4 and 12-15. Womb of life, what is humanity that you even know them, or the woman born that you think of them? Humanity is like a breath, whose days are like a passing shadow. Our sons in their youth are like plants full grown. Our daughters are like cornerstones cut for the building of a palace. Our barns are full from produce of every kind. Our sheep have increased by thousands, many thousands in our surroundings. Our cattle are heavy. There is no breach in the walls, no exile, and no cry of distress in our surroundings. Happy are those to whom such blessings fall. Happy are the people whose God is the womb of life. Amen.